Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of Static Echoes. Tonight we are taking a little sideways step on what we usually talk about. So, as you know, for the last few weeks we've been talking about the Australian Yowie and strangeness in the Pilliga and different things like that. But tonight we're going to take a step back and we're going to look into reincarnation, past lives, and those recurring dreams that I'm pretty sure all of us have. It's one of those interesting things, and I do believe it'll resonate with a lot of listeners because I think we've all had the recurring dreams and we have wondered what they are. And it's interesting to think about the possibilities. So I have my beautiful wife joining with me tonight, and she's a little nervous, so please bear with her because she doesn't come on all the time, but she would like to get on a little bit more and talk about some of these things that really interest her. And she's really interested in past lives and reincarnation. In fact, she knows quite a bit about it. She's done a little bit of study onto it and knows a few specific cases which are very interesting. So after this little intro, we'll get right into it. Joining me tonight is my beautiful wife, Lynn, and she knows a little bit about this, and I love to listen to her when she starts talking about it. So, hello, Lynn.
Hello, Gary, and everyone else.
Yeah, as you can tell, she's very nervous. She doesn't do this very often, but when she does, she really gets going with it all. So, do you want to start us out a little bit about your experience with past lives and reincarnation?
I think the reason I became interested in past lives was because, as I've told you many times, when I was a child, I remembered my past life. I don't remember my past lives anymore, but I remember remembering them. And that's the best way I can describe it. People always look at me funny when I say that, but the closest way I can make people understand what I'm trying to say is, you know, when you wake up in the morning and you've had a really vivid dream and 15, 20 minutes later you can't even remember what happened in the dream?
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's a bit like that.
Yeah.
That's the closest I can. It's not quite the same, but it's the closest I can come. I know when I was a child that I had quite vivid memories of my past life, but as I've grown older, and I think also, as we've discussed many times before, because I was raised in a Western culture which is not inclined to believing in past life experience or reincarnation, the same as some more Eastern cultures, your parents sort of brush it off and tell you that you're imagining things and change the subject or don't want you to talk about it because people might think their child's weird or whatever, for whatever reason. It's not saying that they're bad parents, but for whatever reason, I wasn't encouraged to remember it by my parents. But I know that it happened. So I've always had an interest in, was that real? Was it my imagination? Was it real? Or was it a combination of those two things?
It could be a combination of a lot more than just that.
Oh, and several other things as well. You're right. So as I've gotten older, I mean, I wouldn't say I've done exhaustive studies on past life experiences. I wish I had the time or the brains. But I have done a little bit, and there are extremely intelligent, educated, well-rounded human beings who have put a lot of study into it. So there's some merit to it, and they've found some merit to it. It's just quite difficult to prove.
You were telling me earlier about this doctor. He's pretty high up in one of the universities in America, and he actually studied this for quite a long time. What sort of things did he find, and what was he looking into?
You are talking about Dr. Ian Stevenson, aren't you?
Yes.
I do know something about him. He was actually the chairman of the Department of Psychiatry at the University of Virginia. He studied past lives and reincarnation for the majority of his life, where his reasoning for getting into that kind of field or studying that area was because he was a psychiatrist. He was also a general practitioner, but he was a psychiatrist, and that was his area of expertise and his area of interest, obviously. And he wasn't satisfied with the theory that by the time you're 5 years old, the last 5 years of your life has shaped you are who you're going to be as a person. He thought there was more to it. He thought that there had to be more to it. So what he did was travel the world, and he originally travelled to countries, South American countries, Asian countries, the countries which lean towards more religions like Hindu, and I mean there's a lot of religions in those places, but that Hinduism that believe in reincarnation, like Buddhism as well. But he found it was too easy going to those places. That's something he realised sort of fairly early in to that. It was easy to find stories of reincarnation in countries that believed in it, basically. So he mixed it up a bit and started going to places where people didn't believe so much in reincarnation and told their kids to shush and, don't be silly and you're imagining it and it was just a dream and all those things that parents say, and found some pretty compelling evidence that there's something to the theory of reincarnation. You probably remember the story I've told you before of the little boy in Middlesbrough because it's from your area of birth.
That's right.
There's a little boy born in Middlesbrough in England in 1972. When he was 2 years old, his name was Carl. He was 2 years old. He started drawing a symbol of an eagle. He wasn't drawing birds. He was drawing a symbol of an eagle. He also started drawing swastikas, which is not something that a 2-year-old in 1972 was particularly exposed to.
No.
So this was before he could even talk. So his parents thought that was odd. But then when he was 4 and could vocalise and also draw more clearly, he started drawing the cockpit of a plane. The cockpit of a plane. And we've discussed before that it was a Messerschmitt.
Yes, a Messerschmitt.
A Messerschmitt cockpit down to the exact location of switches and dials and, all of those things. And also there was, his mum talked about when if there was a movie depicting the Second World War on television, which there was a lot of in 1972 from memory, it was still pretty much the Second World War was still very much a part of our culture at that point because it wasn't that long ago. He would laugh at the uniforms and say, that's wrong, the German uniform specifically. That's not right. The buttons weren't there. And he was very young, like he'd never seen a German uniform. And he was usually correct about what he was saying. So long story short, as I always say, because I have a tendency to waffle, he woke up in the middle of the night when he was a little bit older. He was crying and his mum was comforting him, and he described his death in a plane crash in which his leg was severed. That in itself was interesting, but the interesting part of it is that there was a German plane that did crash in the area and which was not very unceremoniously buried during the Second World War as it was with the bodies in it, I believe. Wasn't it? They just covered it up, basically.
Yeah.
And there were 3 bodies found in the plane. Many years later, I think it was in 1992, wasn't it? They found this, I think.
Yeah, they were doing a redevelopment and they were digging up ready for pouring footings, and they found the wreck.
And they were digging it up, yes. And they found a 4th skeleton, which was away from the fuselage. It had been obviously thrown from the fuselage, and it was missing its leg. He had described, the leg was there, but it was severed, which he had described. even more interesting about that plane had actually bombed was it called the Skin Works? Brickworks?
Yeah,
something like that. Had bombed the Skinwork brickworks before it ultimately crashed. And Carl Eden, by this point, was 20 years old and worked at the Skinworks brickworks, which is probably just a coincidence. He was also murdered in the same year as the plane was discovered. But the other interesting thing too, because history had a bit more time to gather evidence, they found a photo of the missing, he was the gunner, whose leg was severed. And when they compared it to a photo of Carl Eden, there was a very close resemblance. And Gary and I have seen the photos. Yeah. Very close resemblance. Almost could definitely be brothers.
Definitely.
Yeah, they particularly around the nose. It had a very unusual nose shape and it's bang on exactly the same. And the other interesting thing about that too is that Carl Eden's family were all dark-haired, not dark-skinned, but olive-skinned, and he was blonde and blue-eyed.
Yeah, very Aryan, which fits right in with that whole German ideology.
Well, even just a bit, but even just coming from Germany, like there are a lot of blonde and blue-eyed people in Germany anyway out there. But it's interesting, like because you can kind of back things up a little bit. There was a few anomalies in the story. Like Gary will always say that a Messerschmitt is not a plane that would carry 4 people, which is probably correct. But
it's 100% correct.
My apologies. Every now and again I'll say Gary is correct, and this is one of those times. Gary is correct. But it doesn't mean he didn't see other planes or given that he was in the German Air Force, he would have been exposed to what a Messerschmitt looked like.
Correct. So, what we were talking about earlier is that obviously with him being in the in the German Air Force and being a gunner for one of these, it wasn't a Heinkel, but it was a different bomber. It was a bomber.
Mm-hmm.
And the town that I grew up in was a town called Thornaby-on-Tees, which is just in between Middlesbrough and Stockton up in the North Yorkshire area there. And it was an aerodrome, basically an air base in the Second World War. So we quite often were under the pressure of having bombing runs and things like that come towards us. I mean, this was before my time, obviously. I'm not quite that old. But the house that my nana had when I lived back there was actually on the air base itself. And even back then, there were a lot of wrecks of the old bunkers and things like that. And that was back in the 70s and early 80s before I came here to Australia. So it is still very prevalent in the history of Thornaby, where I grew up, and this plane wreck was actually one of those things that was sort of brushed away. But as you said, as history sort of looks a little more kindly on the fact that a lot of these Germans were just doing their job, same as a lot of the Allied forces were doing, same sort of thing, just doing what they were told. These guys were actually given a proper military style funeral, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. They were, which is history writing itself in a very nice way, because they were just boys, weren't they? In the end, just doing what they thought was right, and that happens on both sides. But and that's a whole other conversation. But the other interesting thing about it is that Carl had a pronounced birthmark on his right. Was it his right leg?
Yeah.
So his right leg in exactly the same location where the severed leg was found. I mean, it was skeletal by this point, but it was severed by the glass windows. Obviously, it was thrown from. Do they call it a bubble?
You can call it a bubble. Anybody that knows what a Heinkel or one of those types of German bombers are, they had a big glass nose, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, well, he actually was thrown from that, which is what severed his leg. And it was severed in the same way, same direction as the birthmark on Carl Dean's leg, which is interesting. I think it's interesting.
It is. And I mean, when you and I first met, one of our first dates, we went to this place called Echoes, which it was, I think they call them sound chamber. It's like a teepee type setup, and they would have gongs in there. They would have crystal bowls and didgeridoos, and basically you'd have up to 14 people in these like little yoga beds all around, and they would play the gongs, play the didgeridoos and the bowls, and you were fully immersed in sound. But as Lynn knows, that sound seems to dissipate. It just seems to fade away, and all you feel is the vibrations. And what's interesting about this, there's been a lot of scientific studies done about this, and in fact, echoes were part of an international scientific study of this sound therapy. And these vibrations have been found to actually alter your brain waves. And what's interesting about that is where it takes you afterwards. Now, when we had one of our first dates, not the first day, but one of them, we went there, and it was very interesting, wasn't it?
It was. I'm going to go back a few more months before that. I had a past life reading, and I had always had a passing interest in past lives beforehand. It's very interesting how it all came about, actually, because I was never really into psychics. I was quite skeptical probably from just lack of exposure, because I've been to psychics since, and there's definitely some moments where you go, okay, how on earth did she know that? But this particular psychic experience that I had, I was going through a rough time. My daughters bought me a visit to a psychic. When I got there, I had no intention of having a past life reading. And when I walked in, she started doing a psychic reading. And about halfway through, she said, "You know what? You need a past life reading." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's interesting." So she took me through a story of what had happened to me when I was, not even when I was younger, but when in a very ancient time. And she also told me that I had been married in this ancient time and that I was very soon going to meet my husband. Again, we were going to come back together. We had been betrayed by our son, and he had killed my husband, murdered my husband, and that I would know him when I met him, but I had to be ready, was basically what she said. So then going back a few months later, I met Gary. He was pretty much what she described to me, which was nice. But I didn't really share much of that with Gary because we hadn't known each other very long. We went to the sound chamber, had we, Gary?
No.
A couple of months maybe.
Yeah.
So it was pretty new relationship. And I didn't want him to think I don't know why I was worried Gary was going to think I was weird because I believed in psychic stuff because it's Gary. But I was just testing the waters. So he suggested we go to this sound chamber. I'd never heard much about it. Then what happened, Gary? I'm passing it back to you.
Well, I don't know how many people who are listening in have actually done one of these sound chamber sessions. I fully recommend it if you ever get the option to do it. But they do this thing where they start you off and it's very light tones initially just to get you all settled in, and then it goes deeper and deeper, and they start using the different tones which apparently activate these different brain waves and then take you to these different places. Now, when they complete it, what surprises me straight up is it's a 2-hour session that you do. And because a lot of these tones, it's so loud when it starts off, but it very quickly just disappears. And you wherever you are, because everybody has a completely different experience. But what happens is suddenly you hear this ting, ting. She's got one of those little triangles that everybody liked to avoid when they were in the school choir. And it's just two of those little high-pitched tings because apparently it's so different to the tones that you're fully immersed in that it actually snaps you back brings you back down. And then everybody sort of has this session where you start to come back and some people just fall asleep, but a lot of people go places. Now, this particular place, Echoes, was actually located on a convergence in ley lines, and the main ley line that goes all the way through to Uluru, which for anybody who's not in Australia is Ayers Rock, which is a very sacred place for our First Nations people. So there's always a lot of activity that comes through on that kind of thing. So that was interesting. But when they finish, they go around talking to everybody and they ask if they want to share their experiences. Now, I had some very weird stuff in mine, and I actually said, because I knew Dorothy, who owned the establishment, I said, look, I'd rather talk to you in private about this. So Lynn and I talked about it in private, didn't we?
We did.
And where it gets interesting is when I start to share my story, Lynn very quickly was affected by it, weren't you?
I was, yeah.
Now, I'm going to throw it back to you.
Basically, what Gary described was what the past life psychic described to me months earlier, and which I'd never shared with Gary. So that was a bit profound, is the word I've used for it before.
Yeah.
And I guess it was a nice kind of profound, because it showed that I was on the right path as far as meeting the right person, the person that I should have been with. But Gary and I realised that we have met before, and it was a nice thing to realise, wasn't it? Because I went to the same place on the same night, laying a metre away from each other on yoga beds. We had never discussed this story before, yet we both went to the same place when affected by the frequencies from the gongs and the didgeridoo and all the sounds that we heard. So, yeah, it was quite a profound experience. Gary went to his past life and I went to mine, so it was nice. Yeah.
And what I do find interesting about all of this as well is that while we are talking about past lives and reincarnation, when we start talking about frequencies and things like that, it gets into the subconscious and it makes you wonder exactly what they can actually trigger and what they can bring up. Now, I've had this conversation before as well. When a human doesn't use every part of their brain, it's been said that every moment, every action, everything you've seen, experienced throughout your entire life is actually stored in your head. And you go, no, how could a brain store that much information? There is no way. I couldn't tell you, what I had for lunch yesterday, let alone what I was doing when I was 15 years old. I mean, I know some of it, obviously, but I couldn't recall every single specific thing that I did. But it's funny that right song, that right smell, that right moment or frequency can actually trigger something in your brain. And I'm sure every single one of you who's listening in has experienced this. And if you have, let us know in the comments what have been triggered for you in the past. But it just shows the actual power of frequencies. In fact, even going back to ancient times, and a lot of what we're talking about is what happened in ancient Egypt. But when you talk about them moving all of the stones for the pyramids and things like that, there are Eastern esoteric religions that have actually proven that certain sound waves can create anti-gravity, basically, and they've made solid stone actually float. So how much goes into these frequencies and things? That's really, really, really something to think about, And then again, getting into past lives, recurring dreams and things like that also play a big part. And
one of the other interesting things that we talked about that night with Dorothy, he's quite a knowledgeable, well, not even quite, a very knowledgeable human being when it comes to anything spiritual, paranormal. She's very knowledgeable. She mentioned the idea of genetic memory, which is a different thing, but also an interesting concept where every one of your ancestors has left a mark on your memory. So your parents and your grandparents and their parents, we're just recycling. It's not this reincarnating as the same people over and over again, and little bits of those memories are staying in your mind. That could be an explanation for, rather than spiritual, that could be another explanation for remembering past lives. I mean, I think it's a combination of both, to be honest. But I don't believe that we just die and go away. Your soul's got too much. There's too much energy in your soul for it just to disappear. But there was another interesting theory, and the other theory that Dr. Richardson had was about phobias. Phobias are also past life memories, because he had documented stories of children who had lived in the middle of a country, never been to the ocean, and were terrified of the ocean. So is that about where they died, how they died in a past life? Who knows? Could be. A lot of the past life memories also were violent deaths, weren't they?
Yeah.
Like people who remember past lives, which goes back again to me remembering, sorry, Gary, but Gary's past life death, because it was violent. He was murdered by our son. So, I mean, that's, I guess, vicarious trauma, isn't it? Even though he didn't murder me, he murdered someone that mattered to me. So that was a very strong past life memory. Yeah.
I mean, you know that I've had this recurring dream for a long time now, and I've talked about it before, but I have this dream where I'm running through a forest or a wooded area. It's nighttime, and there are lots of people running with me. There's, the old torches where you've got a fire on the end of a stick, basically, and we're being chased by somebody or something. We don't know what it is, but we all come out of the woods into this clearing, and it's basically like a beach, and there's water, but we can see there's an island, a silhouette of an island, a pretty big island in front of us. So we all run straight into the water and swim for this island, and I only get so far. And I remember looking back, and I see these people that are all come out chasing us, and then suddenly that's it. I die. Well, I'm assuming I die. That's where the dream ends, the same point every single time. So I'm assuming that's the point where I die. And it's weird, but look, I mean, I'm not going into every single detail, but when you actually look back in history, the island is very reminiscent of Anglesey in northern Wales. And if you follow the history about that was where the Druids had their last stand against the Roman Empire. So again, I don't know. I only know what I see in this recurring dream, but it's almost like we've been chased by the Romans. We're in the water swimming for this island, and I never make it. So I don't know if it is a fragment of a past life or what it is, but when it's the same thing, and I've got no control over when it happens, when you have one of these recurring dreams, they just pop up completely out of nowhere, and you've got no idea what or when it's going to happen. And it does have an effect every single time, and you relive it. It's not like you just know, yep, this is that dream again. You're actually reliving it. It's not until you've sort of finished the dream that you go, yeah, that was it again. So it does have a bit to add to that genetic memory theory.
And I also think the interesting thing about that is, going back to the very beginning of this conversation, I described your usual dream experience. You wake up in the morning, you've just had a dream. Within, I don't know, it might be different for everybody, but for me, within a few minutes, it was so vivid 5 minutes ago. I can't even remember any details. I know I had a dream. I know it was weird, or that it was, I might remember that it had Gary in it, or that it had my daughter in it or something. but the details just escape me, and you can't recover them. I've tried so hard. I've tried keeping a dream journal, but I don't even have long enough to write the dreams down before it's completely gone. But with the recurring dreams that Gary's describing, they're vivid. You remember them. So they're a different type of dream for whatever reason. They're not your run-of-the-mill dream, are they?
No.
They're different. Yeah, and I think I don't know if everybody has recurring dreams. I have recurring dreams of losing my head, so obviously.
Wow.
Well, yeah, I do. I've always had dreams. I mean, I've had other recurring dreams. When I was a kid, I used to dream that I was in the local shopping centre naked, but hopefully that's not from a past life.
Wow.
Or at school naked, something like that. But I think that's more an anxiety thing. But I think, dreams of having your head chopped off or part of my face removed was another one, like the front of my face chopped off was a recurring thing for me when I was, even now, I have them occasionally now.
It's getting very colourful, this conversation. I didn't think we were going to go there.
Everyone has the naked dreams.
No, not really.
Okay.
No.
What about the falling through sand ones? Do you have those? I have those too. But anyway.
Yeah, we're getting off topic now. We're heading into dreams, which is a completely different podcast. And if anybody wants to hear about the power of a dream in a podcast, let me know in the comments and we will certainly do an episode on dreaming.
It is a different thing, but if in fact some dreams are past life memories, they definitely cross over.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. It's all very difficult to quantify or prove. That's the problem. But again, going back to this very interesting character, Dr. Ian Richardson, he tried for most of his life. He only died in 2007. So for most of his life, he dedicated his life trying to prove the theory that past lives exist, that we do actually come back over and over again. And I like to think that's true.
Well, I mean, okay, so when you talk about religion, they talk about the soul and things like that. Now, how do you quantify the soul? I know there are certain aspects that have been measured. When a person dies, they do measure a very minor quantifiable difference in the person's body weight. Now, obviously, science will turn around and say that is air leaving the body, or it's this or it's that. But science like to think of it as the soul. So if it's got weight to it, what is it? Is it physical?
I find that troublesome in that it's always this. It's pretty much the same amount with every person, isn't it? It's the same.
21 grams, 22
right,
grams,
so
something
not
like that.
every single person who dies loses 21 grams of air?
No.
I mean, it's quite specific, isn't it?
It is. And where I'm going with that is that's what religion says. Now, I'm not a person of religion, so I don't put a lot into that. But there have been TV shows like that show that we used to watch called Evil, where they actually did a full episode on this specific thing about weighing when somebody dies and actually weighing down to the gram at the point of passing, and they actually do see that. And apparently there is a scientific study of that, and there are actual scientific readings on that, so you can look them up for yourself. But one of the things that I do find interesting is, again, jumping back into science, and that is that energy cannot be destroyed. Energy can be transformed, but it can never be destroyed. So what I mean by that is, obviously, water is a liquid, but if you heat it up, it becomes a vapor, and if you chill it down, it becomes ice, so it becomes a solid. It can't be destroyed, it just transforms. And it's the same when you look at nuclear energy, you look at nucleus, and I'm not going to get into all this scientific techno babble crap.
Mumbo jumbo.
Yeah. But basically what happens is, if you do have a power source, because everybody says that you are the sum of your experience, your life experiences, and that's what makes you who you are. But no, what that does is that actually guides you in this life about your interests and things like that. Who you are is there from the moment you were born. So when a person dies or passes away or transforms or moves on, whatever you want to say, that then becomes a case of, do they automatically just float there in space like a vapor and then settle into something new? Or do you travel through space and everything and before coming back? Because sometimes when you talk to people about reincarnation, it is very rare for them to come back as somebody from a few years ago. You know, I think the case that you were talking about that Carl Eden is probably the most recent case, as in, you know, he died in the 40s in the Second World War and he was born in the 70s. So, you know, you're talking 30 years. Whereas most cases, they talk about going back to Roman times, going back to Egyptian times or whatever.
And there's two things I think about that. Firstly, as far as humans go, that's a long time. But as far as souls go, it's probably not long.
No.
Also, do we remember it's possible that we were here 100 years ago, but it just wasn't that memorable a lifetime. I know, and going back to the past life reading I had, this lady explained to me that each life teaches you lessons. You come back to souls that you're drawn to. That's why, I mean, my daughter, I 100% believe that my oldest daughter has at some point been my mother. And the sum of your experience is not just who you are. I think as parents, we could probably say that when your child's born, they've already got a personality, don't they?
Yeah.
There's already somebody there. A newborn baby isn't a blob.
No, that's
they have a personality. They already are forming who they are. And I mean, it can be changed by peer groups and life experience, but the core of who that person is always there. And I mean, I know they call it your inner child. I am still the same being that I was when I was 5 years old.
Yeah.
And I know that I am, and I'm quite in touch with that. I'm in touch with my inner child, which is a good place to be in. But the energy that is your soul is completely separate from, as someone who meditates and who tries to find that within myself, your soul and your body are two completely different aspects of the same being as you are now. They're separate. You can find, if you meditate enough, I mean, I'm not suggesting everybody should meditate. You guys do you. But when you focus on your inner self and your soul and what makes you who you are, you can definitely find, some people call it is it the silver cord? They call it, Gary?
Yeah, something
the
like
silver
those
cord,
lines, yeah.
Or whatever you want to describe it as, that connects you to your soul and your body. So, it's definitely an energy that I think most people who do any kind of spiritual, you don't have to be a spiritual person, but anyone who thinks about why am I here or how did we get here, what's the reason for all of this, knows that it's more than just getting up and going to work and cleaning the toilet. There's more to our life and to our soul and our journey than that. This is just the lifetime that we're in right now.
Yep.
But yeah, I think there has to be something to it. I don't know what it is, but I want there to be something to it, which is why it interests me.
Yeah. Anyway, on that, I think it's time for us to go. So to everybody out there, do you want to share your stories of possible reincarnation or past life memories? All those recurring dreams.
Yeah, and I mean, anyone who wants to share, my apologies, anyone who would like to share it and have a conversation about their experiences, I would be really interested in joining in that. Gary.
Okay. Okay, on that, I think it is time for us to go. That was my wife doing the wifely thing. And
come on, guys.
Yeah.
Get on Gary's show. He's awesome.
Oh. Anyway, on that, we are going to go now because now I'm starting to go red. All right. Take it easy, people. And don't forget, if you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe because it does help this little channel out. We are starting to get somewhere. We are starting to get a few people that listen in. And if you've got a topic you want me to cover, please let me know in the comments or shoot me a message and we will do our best to cover everything so that everybody is hearing something that they want to hear about, because I don't know what everybody is wanting to listen to. So I need you to tell me what you want to listen to and then we will go there. So anyway, until next week, thank you for tuning in and keep looking up. Take it easy, guys.